He's now an academic with a think tank. In the past, he's served in both Gaza and Lebanon. Jonathan Conricus, good morning.
Good morning.
Is the war over between Hamas and Israel?
Far from it. We are at the ceasefire, and that ceasefire may be violated by Hamas, and they have decided not to return hostages. That will generate an Israeli response, which I think is in the making. And the ceasefire was only a ceasefire. I know that many people around the world, in Australia as well, they celebrated at the signing of the ceasefire, and people started speaking about peace. I was on Australian TV and I had to correct interviewers and say, well, no, this isn't, unfortunately, sadly, mostly for us, not an end to the conflict, and it isn't peace. It's just a ceasefire.
Donald Trump has said that Hamas has to return all the hostages, the remaining hostages, by this weekend, by Saturday. Otherwise, there will be consequences. He hasn't said exactly what. Do you think Hamas will do this?
No.
No?
I don't think Hamas will hand over all the hostages. I've been on record saying several times that I think, sadly, we are not going to get all of our hostages out. Hamas strategically will keep some of the hostages. The only thing that surprises me is how quickly Hamas has decided to violate the ceasefire. I thought that they would follow through and hand over the first 33 Israeli hostages and then start making up excuses and problems in order not to go on to a second stage. I am surprised to see that so early on they've already decided to stop returning hostages. They know very well that if they stop returning hostages, that means an end to a ceasefire and a return to war. So when they released a message 2 days ago that they are stopping the release of hostages, that means that they want to go back to war, and Israel will probably do that.
So you think the war could start again as soon as maybe this coming Sunday?
I think that if Hamas failed to return Israeli hostages, and by the way, we're speaking about a total of 76 remaining Israeli hostages, almost 500 days in Hamas captivity. I don't know if you saw the pictures, but when I saw the last Israeli hostages released last Saturday, 3 Israeli men, civilians, who were taken from their homes in their pajamas on October the 7th, they were taken by Hamas and by Palestinian civilians as free and healthy men, and they came back looking like Holocaust survivors from death camps. And that really I think it created shockwaves of rage in Israel. You see that happening. You see that level of humiliation, torture, depraved abuse by Hamas. And I think that has a public response. On the strategic level, I think it's fair to assume that we will see ourselves go back to hostilities.
Let's just hope that you're wrong and the ceasefire does hold and it becomes peace is the wrong word, but at least an absence of, widespread conflict for the time being. Can you say that Israel has won the war?
Not yet. Winning the war, in my mind, winning, even though I'm a former military man, and it would be tempting to measure victory or defeat by military standards, for me, victory is for there to be a positive growth of Israeli Jewish population around the Gaza Strip and in northern Israel, where the kindergartens, the child centers will be full of Jewish kids being brought up, and where there will be a sense of security for Israelis to go back home. That sadly is still not the case. And just a point about ceasefire and all that. Those who want stability and peace in the Middle East, they need to understand that won't happen as long as Hamas is around. As long as Hamas are able to control the Gaza Strip, we are not going to have peace, and neither are the Palestinians.
But isn't there a problem here? I mean, I know one of Israel's stated aims was to remove Hamas, and yet we see with the hostages being handed over, we've got Hamas soldiers, terrorists, call them what you will, but I mean, they've got uniforms on, they're well armed, they've got assault rifles, machine guns.
They're well fed, by the way.
Well fed. So they haven't gone away.
No.
And isn't there an issue that after a year of conflict that, you're going to have a new generation of teenage boys and young men who will want to join Hamas and try and take revenge on Israel? And, it's arguable that in a few years, the new version of Hamas could be even worse than the old version.
Speaking of uniforms, it's interesting, they have come out of hiding, these Hamas terrorists, and this is the first time that they've been in uniform for the last year and a half. They've been fighting in civilian clothes, and they take out the uniforms for parades and media appearances.
Sure.
More to the point, Hamas hasn't been defeated, and it hasn't been defeated because Israel has been prevented from applying the full capacity of force that it needs in order to defeat Hamas. And what Israel, I think, will do if the ceasefire is violated by Hamas is to apply strategies and tactics that will be different from what we've seen over the last year and a half. Different in the sense of much harsher. And I think that
harsher than the war that we've already had.
Yes, harsher than what has already happened.
But isn't there a problem here? I mean, I think Israel was justified to do part of what it did because, the response to the October the 7th massacre in 2023. But rightly or wrongly, it has resulted in a global rise of anti-Semitism. Countries like ours, which were staunch friends of Israel, now are not quite sure what they think.
Yeah.
If Israel has an even harsher response, if the ceasefire is breached this weekend, isn't that going to turn more of the West against Israel? Like, might it make the Americans rethink their support for Israel?
No, on the contrary, I think America will now be more on the side of Israel, and I think that the restrictions that were applied on Israel in really defeating its enemies, and I want to put things into context here. You wouldn't have said what you said about harsh measures and that if we put this in a historical context. If we had been speaking about Nazis, about the Japanese Empire, about Italian fascists, Hamas is that version of it. They're a Middle Eastern version of a totalitarian, absolutely crazy death cult, and their aim is to destroy the state of Israel. And there's no real negotiation to be made with them. There's no slack here. Ceasefire, it only means ceasefire. The Arabic term is hudna, and it means that they will have a ceasefire until they're strong enough to go back to jihad, until they're in a position that they continue their quest for the destruction of the state of Israel.
But is there a long-term solution? I know, various US presidents and different brands of Israeli leadership have tried to have a solution and got close. But I mean, is it possible you could go to, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and say, look, we will give you a state here. It'll be Gaza on one side and West Bank on the other. Responsible people have to govern it. You've got to stop attacking Israel. Is there a possibility of that happening, or is it just a pipe dream?
There is a possibility, and there's great yearning for it. Israel has made 4 serious proposals by 4 different Israeli prime ministers during history, and they have all 4 been rejected by the Palestinians. All of what you said, Gaza, Judea and Samaria, what you refer to as the West Bank, even parts of Jerusalem as a Palestinian capital, that has been offered to Palestinians, and it has been rejected.
So does that mean that a two-state solution is not going to happen?
Looking at Hamas and listening to what Palestinians are saying, looking at polls and surveys of Palestinian positions, sadly, I don't think that it is for our generation to enjoy.
So essentially we look at it from a very safe country, although in some ways it's proving not to be so safe, but we look at it and, it seems like an endless cycle of violence, a few years of peace, more violence, peace, violence, and so forth. Is that the most likely future?
You have to listen to what Gazans are saying. You have to listen to what their aspiration is. When Hamas, their future outlook on life is a binary situation where they say there's not room for 2 nations, there is room for one. It is a Sharia-based political entity in Palestine, and there's no room for Jews. Now, you tell me, is that something that we can negotiate? Should we meet them halfway? Should we allow them to continue to create military capabilities and to threaten us? No. I think we've been doing that for the last 20 years. We allowed this monster to grow on our borders. We were complacent. We didn't listen to what they were saying in Arabic. And what we suffered was a humiliating and absolutely horrible attack on October the 7th, which shouldn't have happened, but it happened. And now I think it is upon us to really listen to what they're saying. I'm a man, I've voted for peace my entire life. I want my kids to live in peace. I don't want my kids, my 4 kids, to have to join the military and fight their entire service. But I think that is unfortunately what's in the cards for us. I would love for us to be able to focus on high tech and culture and many beautiful things, but our enemies and our neighbors aren't letting us.
Just finally, you're in Australia at the moment, and one of the things that has disturbed me, and I've spoken a lot more about what is happening here than getting into what is happening on the other side of the world, but What we've seen here is a sort of a mild version of Middle Eastern conflict. There's been an enormous rise of anti-Semitism. I see it in the UK, in Europe, and here, Jewish schools being targeted, synagogues being firebombed. You might have just heard in our news before that 2 hospital workers, both Islamic in Western Sydney, are saying that they want to kill Israelis in the hospital, which I find extraordinary. Does it worry you that the friendly parts of the Western world seem to be going this way?
It is very worrying. These 2 workers, and it's not confirmed yet, so I'm cautious with what I say, but they can actually take inspiration from the medical system in Israel. In Israel, we have Arab Muslim doctors and nurses who work in Israeli hospitals. Actually, they're the majority of the medical staff, and they give excellent medical service to everyone, to Jews, to Muslims. You have Jewish doctors providing life-saving surgery for Muslims, and you have Arab workers, whether there's doctors or nurses, who do perform brilliantly. That's how it's supposed to be. That's how it works in Israel. So I find it very, very disturbing if it is true, these reports. Now, yes, I am saddened. I'm saddened mostly by cowardly leadership. I'm saddened by coward Western politicians who are cowering to local constituents who may be Muslims, who may be Islamists, who may be Hamas supporters or Iran supporters or funded by Qatar or whatever. I'm saddened to see politicians do this because I think, in history, Jews have many times been first to be attacked, but they're usually not last. And when a country and a society allows that to be normalized, bad things follow. And I've only been a week in Australia, but I'm amazed by the beautiful country you have, by the order, by the clean streets, by how pleasant everybody are, and by the lush and beautiful land you have. And that should be preserved. And it's too bad that, these negative things are happening, and they should be stopped. And the real key here is political leadership and courage, and to apply law and order.
Well, don't stare too closely at some of the streets here in Melbourne because there's plenty of graffiti and weeds and lack of cleanliness. But
well,
I appreciate...
you call it street art, right?
Well, some people do.
Yeah.
All right, look, Jonathan Conricus is our guest. He's a former Lieutenant Colonel with the Israeli Defence Forces. He's worked as a Israeli Defence Force spokesperson, now with a think tank. And we're going to take some calls in a moment. And we are taking your calls. As I said, be polite. 133693. Sharon, good morning.
Hey, Tom. I was just wanting to know, did this gentleman think that Donald Trump saying we will take over the Gaza Strip and we will find Hamas and we will kill you, did that have an effect on the hostage exchange and provoke war?
Yeah, that's a good question, Sharon. So Jonathan, Donald Trump a week ago came out and said we're going to move all the people in the Gaza Strip, which is I think 2.5 million, to somewhere else, and then develop the Gaza Strip with hotels and casinos and things. I mean, is that at all realistic?
I think that President Trump has had a profound influence so far. His push and his gravitas was, I think, what really caused the ceasefire and the hostage deal to materialize. I have no doubt about it. His personal envoy, Witkoff, appears to be a very persuasive individual. And I think that Trump's ideals, perhaps while not 100% implementable, I think they're moving the goalposts, and I think that they are hopefully introducing new lines of thinking and perhaps some more creative solutions to a problem that has plagued Arabs and Israelis for a long, long time. We've been trying to do the same thing over and over again with bad results, and in some cases that's the definition of insanity, when you do the same thing over and over and expect different results. Yeah. Maybe now we'll get different results.
Yeah, my guess is that what Trump is saying is we're not going to have a forced removal, but we want to create businesses, ways for Gazans to get ahead. Anyway, we'll see.
Yeah.
Taz, good morning.
Good morning. How are you going?
Not bad, Taz.
Look, I just wanted to just put it out there that I think that we need to just lower the temperature and realise that there's a lot, millions of Muslims all over the world, especially here in Australia, that have absolutely nothing to do with this hatred and this violence. If you are a supporter of Gaza, does not make you anti-Semitic. If you are saying what Trump is suggesting is complete ethnic cleansing, that does not make you anti-Semitic. I have Jewish friends. I'm a follower of the Islamic faith. I'm a practicing Muslim. One of my best friends is Jewish. And I believe that if we just let it all, if we just get more Muslim voices out to say that this is not the norm, then the tone will become, because I'm afraid that it's all becoming a little bit Islamophobic by putting all these views out constantly that the Muslims hate the Jews.
But Taz, I'm sorry, it's not Islamophobia that has caused these 2 Islamic workers in Bankstown Hospital to say they want to kill Jews. I mean that's not Islamophobia. They chose to say that.
It is a complete silly, stupid, and ridiculous statement to say, just as much as Trump's statement is to wipe out a whole population of people and move into other countries forcefully and then develop it. Now, I think they're just as stupid as each other.
Well, maybe.
And we just need to lower the tone and just realise that there's a lot of Muslims out there that actually have a lot of hope for the future of a 2-state solution.
Look, Taz, thank you. And I agree. And my hope when this latest war started in the Middle East was that we wouldn't see, or we'd see reasonableness, sort of happen in Australia. But unfortunately, we haven't.
Maybe I can say one thing.
Sure.
I would say salam. To Taz, I would say salam or shalom. And I think that Muslim voices that speak up and say that this is not our way of Muslims around the world is not the way of jihad. It's not the way of armed fighting and terrorism. Our way is a way of peace, of tolerance, of respect and coexistence. That is what's so sorely needed. And that is that's an area that has been so quiet, so vacant, so dormant. We haven't heard that from Muslim leaders around the world saying, we reject Hamas, we reject what the Palestinians are doing. This is not the way of Islam. And by the way, I agree. There are many millions of Muslims, I think, who are peaceful and don't want all this jihad and horrible terrorism.
Well, I would agree. And of course, most Muslims who have come to live in Australia, by and large, were fleeing other conflicts. And what they found here is a, by and large, very peaceful and wealthy country. And, living here is about as good as anywhere, really. In fact, most Australians will tell you they think Australia is the best country on earth. So most don't want violence. They don't want wars here. They don't want hatreds from the other side of the world. But, well, there is some of that hatred, I would argue, with the minority. John joins us now. John, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Tom. John, in the past, the world has been calling for a 2-state solution. But in the past, is it correct that Israel offered exactly that 2 or 3 times in the past and the Palestinians rejected that? Is that true? And if so, why did they do that?
Jonathan?
Israel did indeed propose that. It has been made by there have been 4 different peace proposals made by Israel, by different Israeli prime ministers, by Ehud Olmert, by Ehud Barak, by Shimon Peres and Yitzhak Rabin, different prime ministers, and they've made very, very comprehensive and sincere peace proposals with maps, with land swaps, with population swaps, with a Palestinian capital in eastern part of Jerusalem, and many, I would say, sincere offers and real intentions to get peace with the Palestinians. Sadly, they have been rejected by 2 Palestinian leaders, first Yasser Arafat and then Mahmoud Abbas, both of them leaders of the Palestinian Authority. Of course, there's no peace offer to be made to Hamas, just like you wouldn't make a peace offer to Hitler or to Mussolini or to any other, or to the leader of ISIS. You don't make peace offers with them, but with others we have made, and they have been rejected. I think that Israel will continue to pursue that path, but sadly I have to say that it has been, I'd say, at least delayed by the current attacks by Hamas and by the very cruel reality that we see, and by many Palestinians saying that our way forward is the way of jihad and Hamas, and that is not conducive to peace.
We'll take one more call. Jonathan Conricus is with us. Steve, go ahead.
Yes, I'm sickened by this anti-Semitic attitude that seems to be flourishing in parts of Australia. I've lived in some of the most Jewish suburbs in Melbourne, Elsternwick, Eastern Kilda, Caulfield. I have great respect for the Jewish people. My best friend is a 60-year-old Jewish woman who's the kindest, most generous, and also the smartest person I know. And I just there'll always be a rejection of Palestinian of a peace offer, because most of the Arab world, whether they admit to it openly or not, really want to see the entire destruction of Israel. So, and I have great respect for Jewish people. I think their contribution to the arts and sciences cannot be underestimated. They are amongst the smartest people in the world. And I think there's also a degree of jealousy about who they are, because they're generally very successful. They're very good with finance. They're very good in the sciences. And as Neil deGrasse Tyson put it, he said, out of the whole 1.5 billion Islamic people in the world, there has been one winner of a Nobel Prize, and there's one postcode in New York which will produce 20% of all the Nobel Prizes.
Well, Steve, I don't think we want to get down the line of who's got the most Nobel Prizes, but I do take your point. Look, we are out of time, but Jonathan Conricus, enjoy the rest of your trip here to Australia.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here today and for taking calls. I've got to tell you, with the people that run the state of Victoria, Jacinta Allen and Ben Carroll, they don't like to take calls, and I appreciate the fact that you did.
Very happy to, so thank you.